Can the people of Ukraine and their armed forces defeat Russia? There are many who believe they can, not least in the United States. And two of America's top officials have been in Kyiv and at the Ramstein air base here in Germany to deliver a forceful message of solidarity from Washington to the Ukrainian leadership. Germany, meanwhile, has changed course and promised to send heavy military equipment to Ukraine against the Russian aggression. So on to the point, we ask Germany's Ukraine U-turn, can heavy weapons tilt the balance against Putin? Well, thanks so very much indeed for joining us here on To The Point, where my guests are Jessica Berlin, a visiting fellow at the German Marshall Foundation, also Gustav Gressel, a military specialist with the European Council on Foreign Relations, and Konstantin Hackethal. He's a Russian-born presenter with OstWestTV, that is East-West TV, a Russian-language broadcaster based here in Berlin. Once again, great to have you here, all three of you. And Jessica, I'd like to begin with you, if I might. And this visit that I just mentioned to Ukraine and Germany by American Secretary of State Tony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. Now, that seems to me to have been a very important meeting as I look back on it. And I wonder if you share my impression that something really happened there.
Absolutely. This was a hugely consequential meeting. Secretary Austin and Blinken, as you mentioned, they went from Kiev to Germany and held this meeting on German ground. This is the Americans coming to Europe and bringing their support and their convening power to European soil. Also, very significantly, they were able to secure German support for heavy weaponry delivery at this meeting. And furthermore, the 40 states that were brought together in this meeting were not only NATO members. Countries from Africa, Asia, and the Middle East were also present. It truly marks a new stage in the commitment and the long-term perspective of support for Ukraine from NATO and the world.
It was certainly a very broad palette, and my sense was that you could literally see the Americans sort of getting into the driving seat, shifting up a couple of gears, sending this message to the Russians, that a real urgency on display.
Absolutely. Making clear to Russia that not only NATO, but the world, the democratic, free world, such as it is, stands behind Ukraine and is in it for the long haul. This meeting will be a monthly meeting as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's an important point that you're making there. And Konstantin, what do you make of it? Do you agree that the Americans have perhaps seen a window of opportunity here and they want to grasp that opportunity to stamp their leadership on what comes next in our dealings with Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, sure. I'm sure that Putin is dealing more with United States. Actually, all his addresses, all his speeches are addressed to United States. So the United States is a main gamer. So that's why United States should state or send a signal to Russia to show this solidarity. So I agree with Jessica that more than 40 countries, it's a really strong signal to Kremlin.
Okay, so, well, to get another perspective on the visit and to understand the importance of what was said, I'd like to just listen to one particular comment from Lloyd Austin. So here's what the Pentagon chief had to say.
Ukraine clearly believes that it can win, and so does everyone here. My Ukrainian friends, we know the burden that you all carry, and we know, and you should know, that all of us have your back, and that's why we're here today, to strengthen the arsenal of Ukrainian democracy.
Powerful statements there, Gustav Gressel. What do you make of the wording? What's your reading of what is being said there?
Well, what has been said there was a strong message of support and unity, and it was also a clarification that the West would not settle for a kind of Minsk III crooked compromise.
Okay.
And that is very important. The other thing that is enormously important, that we have now a planned and coordinated weapon support policy that is coordinated between 40 states, that is coordinated across NATO, that does not only sort of take the long or the short perspective of what can we deliver now, like a Panzerfaust, etc., but that has a comprehensive plan on what is Ukrainians' needs on the short term, on the medium term, on the long term, and who can fill in. And that is enormously important to coordinate this effort and to make it sustainable, instead of just a beauty contest coming from domestic politics where some states want to show and others, like Germany, just want to say no to everything. It is about Ukraine. It's not about our feeling, whether we feel good and people. Ukraine needs to be able to fight.
OK, needs to be able to fight. After, all these positive noises that all four of us are making at the table, I wonder, does all this mean that that Ukraine can win the conflict?
Well, it depends on how do you define winning. Ukraine has a fair chance to exit the war as a sovereign country, where the people elect their own government and they're not ruled by Moscow.
A sovereign country in ruins?
Well, a sovereign country with parts in ruins, but if you see what is done by the occupying powers in that ruins once they enter, being alive and free and not under the constant threat of being shot, you would take the ruins instead of the occupation.
Jessica, what for you does it mean to win, to win in this conflict for the Ukrainian side?
The Russian army needs to be defeated. And what does that mean? That means they need to be so far stopped that they have to pull back at least to the Donbass. Unfortunately, victory in this case would look like a return to the conditions before February 24th, before the invasion, at the very least. But as Secretary Austin has stated, the Russian military needs to be so deeply damaged by this war that they never try to do this again in another country. This is really about, firstly, saving Ukraine from Russian occupation, and secondly, stopping Russia from any future attempts to attack free states. And
there's also a timeline to all this. Lloyd Austin said that Ukraine's backers need to move at the speed of war.
Yes.
Well, I mean, you're saying yes. Explain to me what that means. I sort of stepped away from my reading and looked at a dictionary to try and work out where this comes from. And what was that a reference to exactly?
I think this could be seen as a dig, above all, toward Germany. We have been moving at the speed of our own navel-gazing. Germany has not stepped up in the way that it needed to. We have been much more focused on our own internal debates and a desire to maintain face and not look like that we've made a mistake in the run-up to this war and since the commencement of it. The speed of war means what happens now, what happens today, right now, makes a difference and can determine the course of the rest of this war. We literally do not have time for this kind of Selbstbeschäftigung, we say in German, being obsessed with one's own issues. Yeah. We don't have time for it. We need to act because the only thing that matters right now is the support for Ukraine in winning this fight, because every day that Russia is able to regroup and reconsolidate their forces is a day lost. And every day that Ukraine does not have the weapons and the munitions it needs to push forward and to keep pushing Russian troops when they're already weakened is time and lives lost. Yeah.
It's interesting that we're talking about the speed of war on the one hand, because Vladimir Putin himself, in one of his latest comments that he's been making, talks about his forces being, he called on them to be lightning fast. I think this was an interesting comment that Putin made all round. He said, we have tools no one else can boast of, and we will use them if necessary. That was viewed as a comment about ballistic missiles and nuclear arms. Konstantin, how unsettling for you is it to hear those comments from Vladimir Putin? Because some people say, it's a bluff. Take it easy.
Well, it's difficult to say if it's bluff or not. I mean, the guy has atom bombs, so lots of them. But it's not justified to threaten the whole world with some reasons which he just thought out to invade Ukraine, and now he's threatening the whole world, the existence of the whole world. So it's completely completely nonsense and unjustified, I think. But you ask, what does it mean to win this war? To win this war means that Russia should run out of money to support this war, first of all, to pay the soldiers, to pay the mothers of soldiers who died during this war. And besides that, we have to help Ukraine to run the state, to give money to Ukraine, to make the government work, to make the services, civil services work, etc., etc. So this is important. And also we have to help to those Russians who are sitting now in Russia and waiting when the regime changes, who are free thinkers, to help them to survive this period of time, because they are really horrified what is going on.
Gustav, I wonder what your take is on one of Vladimir Putin's specialities down the years has been destruction, has been devastation, desolation, if you so will. There's his school of thought is disruptive politics. Do you have a sense that Western leaders have now decided that we need to act quickly before there is too much destruction and devastation, and the economy, as I already mentioned, is very, very hard hit already? This could get much worse.
Well, the economy is hit, but the problem is what would be the consequences of inaction? I think we are not, our choice is not between perfectly fine economy and no harm and sanctions and we suffer. The choice we make is sanctions and we suffer, or war, we suffer more. China is closely watching that. China is closely watching that over Taiwan. Can you use dependency, trade dependency, as a weapon to keep the West calm and keep the West at bay? And if we show weakness, they will take notice. The second thing is the nuclear ambitious. Russia is the most aggressive, ambitious nuclear power, but unfortunately there are others. And does the strategy work that you just invade another country and you threaten enough with your nukes, and then things will be fine. And you can have imperial goals as much as you want, and you can draw maps as you like, because as long as you're nuclear power, you can do that. If that will happen, first of all, other nuclear powers might do similar stuff on a much larger scale of destruction than Russia can do. Second thing is, a lot of countries will want to get nukes, because that's exactly what they're longing for. And then we live in a world where energy sanctions are like the kindergarten version of confrontation. Yeah. And this we need to bear in mind. That's what's on the horizon. And either we get our act together and act now, and yes, it's costly, it's painful, and it sucks, but it needs to be done.
This is what... Or Jessica, you're nodding, yeah?
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. This is the German response in particular, as well as of some other of our allies. It's like saying, oh, I don't want to go and get my cavity filled because that'll hurt. But in exchange, you're going to let the entire tooth die. Mm-hmm. This is just a ridiculous logic. And unfortunately, our leaders in this country have not had this conversation with the people to help them understand that there is no easy way out of this conflict. We need to act. We need to make sacrifices economically. We need to identify our goals, communicate them to the people, and implement a strategy to achieve them. And this hasn't been done. It hasn't been articulated as seen by our...
You're talking Chancellor Olaf Scholz here.
In a word, yes.
Yeah. I mean, Germany needs leadership.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of people have been very critical have dismissed Scholz's leadership as a ditherer. You've been among that number. You actually said Chancellor Scholz's strategy is to do as little as possible, as late as possible, in order not to be caught out on the wrong side of history. That's not very kind.
Well, I don't mean it to be kind or unkind. I just see it as, unfortunately, the analysis of the situation and of his policies thus far. As you mentioned, we're right now needing to act at the speed of war. Yeah. And not at the speed of German domestic political debates. And the fact that even in the lead up to this war, we were saying, the German government, the Scholz government was saying for weeks, no, we can't cancel Nord Stream 2, we won't implement these sanctions. We certainly can't block Russia from SWIFT. But then all these things suddenly became possible later on.
How things have changed.
Exactly. Yeah. And we've also been hearing from this government for weeks, we can't deliver heavy weapons. No, that can't be done because it would threaten World War III in a nuclear attack. But that's not the case, and now we've backtracked once again. It shows that...
Surely it is the job of the German Chancellor to worry, to fret, to prevaricate, to sit back and think very, very hard about what could happen to the German people. That's the job of the German Chancellor.
Indeed. But prevarication without end is not leadership. Also, the German government has been emphasizing the word Alleingang, like going it alone, in recent weeks, that Germany doesn't want to risk going it alone in confronting Russia. But this is a nonsense argument. Germany is not going it alone. On the contrary, we are going it alone in our hesitation and in our slowness. Our allies are being much more proactive and much faster than we. So if anything, we are going it alone, but in our hesitation.
But you were quite positive about the fact that we're now going to get some sort of, we're going to get weapon systems in place that actually the Ukrainian military really want. And it's not just about people sort of taking sides and showing colour. It's about actually meeting military demands.
Yes, and I'm deeply grateful to the United States that have pulled this together. And this is what leadership means. Leadership doesn't mean that by the end of the day you will do something everybody else does as well. But leadership means to put on the table, okay, this is the situation, guys. This is what needs to be done. These are the consequences if we fail. And therefore, I want you to do this. And then you can sort of start to negotiate with all other parties and who will do what. And sometimes Germany will not be in a position to help because it doesn't have certain weapon systems, because production times take so long. And sometimes it just must. And it can't afford the debate whether we should, could or would, but it just skip it. So that is leadership that has been expected from Germany from the beginning of the war. The Germans didn't want to lead. I hope now they're good allies and trail the path.
Yes, I just wanted to add maybe that because of this slowness of Germany, Putin sees that the European Union is very weak because no one takes responsibility, no one takes this leadership besides the United States again. So he's laughing about Macron, he's laughing about Scholz, and he's sending back the representatives of European Union. So because they are not too serious for him, not serious guys.
You're a presenter for a broadcaster that many people will know, some people won't, OstWestTV. And I just wonder what your broadcaster has been reporting about the situation about Poland and Bulgaria in the last 24 hours or so. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Yes, it's happened yesterday. I mean, everyone found out that Russian Gazprom just not supplying gas anymore to Poland and Bulgaria. And the Ministry of Environment in Poland, with a very nice name, Anna Moskva, which means Moscow. She said, so Moscow said Poland is ready not to get gas from Russia because they have different alternatives. And I know these alternatives, like in Świnoujście is a city at the Baltic states. The Poland, they just, many years ago, they started to build this port for gas, for this, for fluid gas, liquid gas.
Yeah.
This possibility was also for Germany. Even Olaf Scholz, he wrote a letter to the United States when Trump was a president, and he suggested, in order to make Nord Stream working, he suggested to the government of the United States that he's building also such Gaza ports. But nothing happened. Germany further went to this dependence of Russia.
What happens next? Well, let's. Here's a thought: can Ukraine forces fend off the Russian assault? As we have seen, they're getting support from different sources, above all from the US, which has supplied Ukrainian forces with air defence systems, field guns, drones and armoured vehicles. The big question is, and the one we still need to answer on this show, and we haven't got much time, is it enough?
According to official sources, the U.S. allocated some $4 billion during the first weeks of the war. New pledges keep coming in for Ukrainian President Zelensky, especially from Estonia, Great Britain, and France, amongst others. The Czech Republic was one of the first countries to supply Ukraine with ammunition and tank shells. Tanks from its own stockpile were quick to follow. This was just what Germany wanted. Its initial position was to not export heavy artillery to war zones. Now, Germany is allowing the export of anti-aircraft tanks from old stockpiles, totaling arms deliveries worth just under 200 million euros, with 1 billion euros set to be made available in the long term. A so-called swap deal is also possible. That means that we will support partners who can quickly deliver Soviet-designed weapons now, and later on we will secure their replacement accordingly. Is Ukraine really getting what it needs to defend itself?
Gustav, is it?
Well, it starts to. The problem is, we would have been in a much better situation, of course, if we started this earlier. But Ukraine, in order to maintain the war, in order to be able to defend itself, Ukraine does not only need anti-tank weapons and shoulder-fired stuff that you can use in a city, but also mechanized reserves. Without mechanized reserves, tanks, artillery, all this stuff, Kiev would have been encircled already. Kharkiv would have been encircled already, not fallen, but encircled. So we need to keep that in mind. And these mechanized reserves don't maintain themselves. The Ukrainian defense industry, on which the Ukrainian war effort rested in all of the Donbas war, was predominantly domestic, what they produced for themselves. This is no longer possible because most of Ukraine's defense industry has been attacked by missile attacks. So it's not there. So they need foreign supplies for all these kind of weapon systems. And this is a dynamic situation. We don't know where Russian missiles will strike tomorrow and what tomorrow the Ukrainians might need because of just that strike. It's not the same situation every day. And here the allies now are coordinating with Ukraine what do they need now and what do they need next. I'm quite positive about the support. Just to give you one example, everybody's sending artillery now. Why that? Because NATO, Ukrainian ammunition manufacturers have been destroyed, and NATO does not have ammunition, or not a lot, for the Soviet-type 6-inch guns the Ukrainians are using. If they want to fire the 155mm NATO rounds, which we have plenty of, they need the guns to fire them. So this is why they are supplied now. This is not a political question, what do you want? This is just military needs. You need the gun to fire the stuff we can supply. And we are now on practical grounds, and that's good.
Okay. Possibly our last question, Konstantin, and I'm very intrigued to hear what you're going to have to say. You've been unkind to Germany a little bit. You've been very critical of Germany today, and when we see Annalena Baerbock, the German foreign minister, who we just heard that comment from, she's young, she's pretty dynamic, she's very open to Germany's allies. She's been out and about saying we must learn to become a fighting nation. Is she right, and will it?
She's right. She's actually can fight very well, and it showed her visit to Moscow when she could talk to Lavrov, who is already many years as
a very thick-skinned diplomat.
Very thick-skinned, exactly. So he did a test to her. He just suggested her to drink vodka with him, and she said, if it's a test to be a cool guy, I'm not doing it because I raise up 2 children.
Yeah.
So that's enough. So I think it's a good answer. Yes, and I think the Green Party, they are already they were ready for shipping for shipping of weapons, because Robert Habeck, he visited Ukraine.
Senior figure in the Greens and senior figure in the cabinet.
Yes, and he wanted to supply Ukraine with weapons before the war. So somehow he could understand the situation already there. But of course, this feeling of guilt in Germany of the Second World War stops it. So harms it, I guess. It's not overwhelmed in some heads.
We're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. But it's been a great discussion. I wish we had a little bit more time. But thanks for joining us. Do come back next time. Until then, bye-bye and tschüss.